Hey everybody, Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. A lot going on with Erin, a lot of deterioration in the formation of the storm. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a somewhat good thing because it could make it weaker. But there's a lot of things going on. I'm going to get into all of it. We'll explain, kind of give you the best layman terms on what's happening, the impacts to worry about, the other impacts not to worry about. And obviously, we want to make you aware, not alarmed. So let's take a look at the track. Not a lot has changed in the track, and I'm going to tell you why the track probably isn't going to change a whole lot. There's all these people out there on social media trying to scare you to death with crazy things about shifting west and making landfalls and not understanding anything about anything. So just kind of block those people out. I know it's hard. These people prey on people's sensitivity to these storms. And unfortunately, these are scary storms enough. There's a lot going on. We worry about them all the time. We don't need needless worry. So that's a look at the track. I don't expect the track to change much, and I'll explain more why that's the case coming up in a second. But I want to focus on the satellite imagery today because it's really telling us a lot. I posted earlier on social. People had some great questions about it. It was a little geeky, but I'll kind of explain what's happening right now. If you look carefully, you can see the low level center exposed, meaning wind shear in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere are pushing the storm on the top of the storm this way, and the low level winds are trying to push it this way. So it's literally being torn apart. And why is that important? Well, wind shear does this to our systems. You could see it. The system wants to be vertically stacked. It does not want to be tilted like this. It wants to be like a smokestack where warm, humid air gets fed into the thunderstorms and they get vented out the top. Same thing on this side. You want equal things. But when it starts getting tilted, the low level center gets exposed and the mid level center ends up over here. And so there's nowhere for this to vent and it ends up kind of falling apart a little bit. Now, it's not falling apart, but there are some ragged looking satellite imagery going on this morning. You can actually see a lot of dry air too. I know there's clouds here, but there's no thunderstorms here. So dry air is also getting entrained or moved into the system. I'm going to show you the water vapor part of this. We're going to switch to the low level water vapor loop here. It'll take a second. And you can see the brown or the red or the oranges that you're seeing here. That's dry air. Look at the dry air that's not only around the storm, but really getting pulled into the northwest side. That's a lot of dry air getting pulled in close to the circulation. Now, the storm is looking very lopsided for this reason. That's something to keep a close eye on. We'll look at the mid-level water vapor here. You can see the dry air in the mid-levels as well. So all the moisture is on the right or east side. Now, that could tug it to the east because the thunderstorms could pull the low-level center back to the east. But when you look at this, we're going to zoom in closely here, and I'm going to actually pull up the high-res imagery here. We'll look at the geo one. We'll zoom in, and you can see the circulation. Hopefully, it'll take a second to load. Really good imagery here, by the way. This is GOES 19, which is really cool to look at. You can see the low-level center here, some big thunderstorms trying to develop. That's those towering there. So the mid-level circulation here is a low-level center is here. It's clearly tilted. And sometimes when the thunderstorms develop here, it pulls it back to the east. The thing to remember about hurricanes, they like warm water. I think everyone understands that. But it's just not warm water. You need moist air around it. You also need no wind shear. You could have 100-degree water temperatures, but if you have boatloads of wind shear and dry air, you're not going to do anything. It's like having a high octane fuel and a lawnmower engine to put it into instead of like a Ferrari or Lamborghini. It's not going to do anything. So the wind shear and the dry air is actually crushing this storm right now. It's actually creating quite a bit of problems for it. And you can see this is the wider view. It does look very lopsided currently. So what does that mean long term? Well, hard to say. I would say it's probably not going to get stronger, but there's something else that is probably not good news. This weakening trend is also part of the fact that it's getting bigger. The wind field is spreading out. Now, what happens when the wind field gets bigger is it's hard for the center to get reorganized because all the energy starts spreading out in all directions. Small, compact systems tend to intensify quickly, and they also will stay stronger longer. But these big, sprawling, large systems, while maybe not as strong, they tend to maintain that strength for longer periods of time. So this might not be a Cat 3 or 4. It could be a very large Cat 2. And what that does, and this is the next impact, it's going to push a lot of water. When this thing gets this big, it's like a big snowplow in the ocean or a bulldozer. It's pushing water this direction. So even if the storm does the right turn, which we expect, that water is still built up and it's heading towards the coast. Speaking of the forecast, I don't know why people continue to reiterate some kind of like turn to the left or coast they'll hit. Every single model, every single one. There's not even an outlier remotely close to making landfall. Now, that being said, it could get as close as here, okay? Or it could be as far east as here. So this is a possibility right there. That's close enough with a sprawling system. That's going to put a lot of the wind over coastal North Carolina. So yes, there will be impacts, but direct hit is very, very unlikely. In fact, there's a 99.99999% chance it makes no landfall. Okay. That being said, there are huge impacts regardless because that's the center of the storm. That's not the impacts, right? As we've learned with Helene and other storms, you've got to remember the impacts are what matter, not where the middle goes. So the middle's going to stay out here over the ocean. The problem is it pushes all this water. Look at these waves. Some of these waves offshore could be 25, 30 feet. So these are going to be huge waves off the coast of the entire eastern seaboard. Okay. So we're going to see massive waves. That's going to cause beach erosion, high tides, and all kinds of problems. In fact, we're already starting to see some of the forecast water levels, which are crazy, crazy high. So you see this real quickly. You can see these are the current wave heights, already offshore around 7 to 8 feet near the outer banks. But what I'm watching are some of these forecasts, and I'm actually going to move this over so you guys can see it a little better. We'll show this real quickly. So I love this product. It kind of shows us the potential for the surge, right? We've got, coastal flood advisories, watches, warnings that'll be coming out. We've got storm surge warnings, but just let me give you a quick tour of what I think is going to happen. So let's go to Myrtle Beach. You could see water levels could be as high as 7.3 feet by Thursday. Around the Wilmington area, 6.6 feet. That puts us into the minor flood stage. Heading up towards Atlantic Coast area, Morehead City, Atlantic Beach, 5.4. We head up to the Outer Banks, Ocracoke, 3.1. That's minor flood stage. Could happen a couple times in the high tide cycle. Closer to Hatteras, around 2.7, 3 feet. Remember, that's above most of the level of the land on Highway 12. Heading north, Pamlico Sound, not bad. That's the sound side. We go north, though. This is where things get a little more dire and actually more severe. Going towards the northern Outer Banks into the Tidewater region and the southern Chesapeake, we could see the highest water levels there, 7 feet towards Duck. As you go up towards Virginia Beach, you start seeing some of these levels around 5, 8 feet. And anywhere you see red or purple icons, that means moderate to major flood potential. So let's focus in on the Hampton Roads, Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, the Delmarva Peninsula. You could see these areas in the southern Chesapeake, there's going to be some serious tidal flooding here. And again, this is an area that's very susceptible to tidal flooding. You're probably asking why. Remember, the shape of the coast looks like this, okay? And the water is going to be being pushed like this around our big, broad Erin. It's a large system, even though it's not as strong as you might think. That is pushing a lot of water. The larger the system, the more water it's going to push. And I'll give you an example. We'll go back to the satellite imagery here. Let me turn that off. We'll go back to satellite imagery here. Let me bring this up right here. And you could see as the system gets larger in size, and this is a really good view, you start seeing the cloud shield spreading out in all directions here. This is going to push a lot more water. It's having a much bigger force on more water than a small system that was like this. It would only push this much water. So the force of the water is much broader. So it's going to be pushing a ton of water. Something else that's interesting when I look at satellite imagery, one way you can tell where the storm is moving, where you start seeing the expanse of upper level clouds. See how they're moving this direction? That's a really good indication on where the storm is going to go. That expanding cloud field tells you, kind of gives you the guiding light of, hey, that's where the storm is going to be moving. So that trend to the north is looking good. Lopsided right now. We'll see if this continues. We're going to get an advisory coming up in an hour. But the good news is the storm does not look like it's gaining much strength. The bad news, it's getting much bigger in size, meaning it's going to push a lot of water towards the coast. Our number one concern is water, water, water. Yes, there will be some wind, especially in the Outer Banks, but water is going to be the thing that is the most dangerous, the most life-threatening, and is going to do the most damage. So please heed all local evacuation orders. Be ready to be cut off on these barrier islands for multiple days, because that's the kind of water we're expecting along the coast.